Hi, everybody. Welcome back to my next episode of the Play is Learning podcast. And over these, we have been talking about all things play, learning through play, and play-based learning, and why it's been so crucial for people to sign the petition and also back the campaign to try and make this statutory for all of our children in Key Stage 1 in England. I'm really delighted today to be joined by Eliza Fricker, best-selling author, expert in all things autism, PDA, just a true font of knowledge. And I'm really excited to delve into something a little bit deeper that we haven't touched yet on the podcast, particularly looking at the importance of play-based learning for our children with special educational needs. And we're going to be looking particularly in detail around PDA and what that means for those children. So welcome, Eliza. It's really lovely to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Would you like to introduce yourself a little bit more, go into a bit more detail on who you are, what you do, where you come from, not on birthday, but that's what it's
I
at.
mean, your intro is pretty good, but yeah, I've always been an illustrator, but my work changed a little bit as our educational journey changed. So my daughter had a breakdown from school and was unable to attend. It was the big transition from year 6 to the first year of secondary school. So I found myself at home, and the build up to that had been a very, very long one, very, very, very distressing for both of us, really. And I started drawing those experiences as a way to sort of process them, but also to sort of tell the story, really, because it felt like quite an isolating one when we were going through it. And it turned out that it kind of resonated with lots and lots of people. So that was quite a turn for me, really, from feeling quite lonely going through that to realizing there were lots of other families also going through the same, very, very similar experiences, actually. And that's what's quite interesting. You sort of see the same kind of patterns through this. And then I got asked to write a book about PDA, so the family experience of PDA was the first book I wrote, and since then I've gone on to write quite a few that are either my own, or I also write with other people as well. They will get commissioned for charities, etc., to do illustration work and training and talks. It's nice and varied. So yeah, I'm still drawing, but it's sort of widened what I do now. So
Amazing. Variety is the spice of
it
life.
really is, yeah.
Absolutely. So, ha for people who have very little understanding at all, let's start with the basics. What is PDA? What does that stand for? What does that mean for the individual and the impact on the wider family as well?
Yeah, so it's quite a gloomy title, really. It's pathological demand avoidance. It has been renamed in various forms, and I think one that people are preferring at the minute is pervasive drive for autonomy. And I think the reason that it's really important to know about this is because for a lot of families, they can often their children have already got an autism diagnosis, and then they find that the autism supports that are being offered don't work, and actually can be quite counterproductive for their child. And it's only when they sort of find out about PDA that they get this kind of what they call a kind of light bulb moment, because it's this sort of knowledge then, oh, okay, this is something that represents my child that I didn't previously know about, and actually then that's the gateway into being able to support them in the way that they need. So PDA is really part of a child is usually autistic, but they will have a sort of extreme anxiety, and so anything that they perceive as a demand, whether that's an internal demand, something they really want to do. Often families will say, they really wanted to do this thing, but then it came to the day and they just couldn't do it. So it can be a demand that's internal or external, and often things that we think are really kind of, traditional parenting ways of helping a child, like, offering them rewards or encouragement, that can kind of increase that demand or that expectation. And another way that we describe it when I do webinars, as we often talk about the child being pressure sensitive, and that's a really simple way of explaining what this is like for a child with PDA. That pressure is kind of all around them, and so our job is to reduce those demands as much as we can and take that pressure off as much as we can. And so it can feel like a very different way of parenting, because we can't do often a lot of those traditional things that parenting tells us to do. And we're all conditioned actually quite a lot with a lot of traditional parenting, and they often will backfire. And this is what families will say, the support will be out there for an autistic child, and they'll say, well, why don't you try this or this or this, such as, a reward chart or a whiteboard timetable. All of those things will not work for that child because they will feel like they're a demand.
And that can then translate into school as well, can't I mean school
Yeah.
it's I quite often think about, I'm not an expert in this space at all, but it's almost like the unspoken demands that are just, you know, every brushing your teeth every single morning. That's a demand that we all have, that for like a neurotypical child, it's not, we don't, it's just what you do as part of life. But actually for a child with PDA, just that simple act of having that demand of every single morning you have to brush your teeth
Yeah.
can be too much for them. And there's perceived demands, aren't they, as well? So like an adult might not think they're putting a demand on that child. And I think this is what you can perhaps get in school scenarios even more so. But for that child, it's absolutely off the scale, like what they're being asked to do.
Mm. Yeah, and if you think about, I mean, I did draw that in the family experience of PDA. If you think about the morning before school, if you broke that down and thought about all the demands, brushing your teeth, what do you want for breakfast, get dressed, those are just a few of them. And that's already building up for that child. If we talk about that sort of bucket analogy of filling up the bucket, often for that child with a PDA profile, that bucket is already full before they go to school. And so parents will often talk about having these children having huge meltdowns before they even get to school, because the demands are already building and they know they're then entering another environment that is full of demands all day long. And they often are very often what happens with a lot of children with a PDA profile is they won't often show that in school. So parents will say, mornings or after school are really distressing. My child's having lots of meltdowns, we're walking on eggshells, it's really difficult to manage. And school will say, well, once they're here, they're actually fine. And that's that child often just sort of managing or seeming to manage that environment, but actually they're really, really struggling, hence why parents see these meltdowns before and after school.
Mhm. And there is thousands and thousands of parents that, what you were saying at the beginning, feel isolated, feel like you're on that island, feel like I don't know how to support my child because the sort of traditional advice I'm given isn't aligning to the support that my child's needing in front of me. And I know that you mentioned you went through that with your daughter, and it must have been such a difficult time as a parent, wanting just being like, what, how do I help my child? And I know so many people listening to that will absolutely empathize and relate to that. And the reason why I was really keen to be able to chat with you is obviously the campaign and the petition is about making play-based learning statutory in our schools. Because I personally believe it's the solution to everything. It doesn't matter which area you're looking at. If it's attendance, I'm like, a play-based learning would support with that, because children would be banging on the door, they'd want to come in. If it's supporting our children with additional needs, yeah, because they can actually all truly have that tailored support that they need. They can move when they want to. But we are going to speak about how actually learning through play is really crucial and can be really great for children with a PDA profile. Do you want to go into that a little bit more?
Yeah, and I think, I often talk to families about this because, we've touched on just now how stressful that can be, when you have a child who's really struggling in that environment. And I speak to families all the time and you can see it in their faces, every day is really difficult for them. And they have a child who's really, really distressed, and play is so important to that because obviously it reduces that pressure. immediately reduce that pressure. I say to families, if you have that in the home, for example, in those moments where there's potential tension, if you bring in a playfulness, that will immediately dissipate that, and it will lighten you as well. And so in the school environment, it's so important, because for that child who's going into that environment full of demands, if they feel that there isn't a demand to that learning, it's done through play, they don't even notice that it's learning, because we know that play is learning, that again is taking off that demand for them. So it makes for that really bright, able PDA child, it gives them that opportunity to thrive. Whereas the outlook can often seem quite gloomy. Parents or teachers will say, this child is unable to write because writing is a big demand. But if we brought in that play to that, perhaps that need to write isn't important. And I do talk to lots of people who offer different learning for children, and they often say, we don't expect that of our children, to be able to write stuff down. We make the notes as the adult on what they've done, but play is the way that we get in. And also play is a way to connect, isn't it? It's a huge way for young people to feel safe, is because it's actually building relationship with an adult or other children. And so that's often missing for these young people with a PDA profile, is they go into that environment and they don't feel they've got that kind of safe person. But if we use play within that and build up relationships with staff through that play, that is a really good way for that young person to feel safe.
Yeah, I completely hear exactly what you're saying, and I think this safety, no learning can happen if a child doesn't feel safe. It goes back to our hierarchy of needs and all those sorts of things, isn't it? We need our children to feel safe, to feel secure, to feel happy for them to do any learning. And I always, whenever I'm, supporting a school or advising anybody or talking to a parent, I just think, flip it and imagine being that child. Like, I think about my own children. I'm like, okay, so for me, like, my little boy's gone into year one in September. So his understanding of school was that he went to school, he was in reception, it was really play-based. He got to sort of go outside whenever he wanted. He could build, he could make, he could, play with his peers, he could play with the staff members, he could do whatever he wanted to, really. He didn't really know that he was learning. And then because he'd built that relationship through the play, when his teacher then wanted him to go and do a bit of like focused teaching work, that wasn't a big deal, because he'd do that and then he'd go back into the play. So like the whole environment was just really inclusive, welcoming, engaging, safety net, because actually play makes children feel safe. That's what they do, to process things and make sense of the world. And then after the summer holidays, he's gone back in year one, and I've said, you're going back to school. But I'm like, for him, in his head, school was that experience he had in reception. I don't think really, I mean, I probably did as a parent, but did he truly understand that actually you're going into year one and it would look completely different? So for him in his school, he doesn't have an outdoor area anymore. He doesn't have, he has like quite a small classroom. It's tables and chairs. It's formal. For me around here, I was looking for play-based schools, as everybody knows, couldn't find one. But where he is, I feel like it was the best with the circumstances that I had, which is again a place that lots of us find ourselves be in. And that again links to parental guilt, because you're like, I know there's another way, but I can't find it. But then going into year one, that security, that safety of understanding what school is like and this, and then actually it's completely different. I've literally all imagine if you went to work one day and then you had Christmas off and then you went back to work on Monday, and it was completely different because the play was gone, the environment was different. I'm like, why do we do this to children when there's no need to take away the play? I don't understand why we're so set on doing that, when, like you're saying, it's crucial for connection, it's crucial for safety, and would therefore enable more children to learn and thrive. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I think it comes down to this developmental thing, doesn't it? Where there's this assumption that we all develop at the same point. So at this point we should be here, and at this point we should be here. I mean, this is why, there's, so many parents having to sort of seek diagnosis for their children, because if they're not here by this stage, okay, well then we must locate the problem in the child. No one looks at this environment. The school environment is sort of not up for debate. It's sort of seen as benign, if you like, but we all develop at different paces, and I think that if we have more play, that allows those children to develop at the time that they're ready to move on to the next stage. And I think there's no reason why we can't integrate play continually. It's a bit like, I think it was Tracy M in the article said, why do we stop drawing as adults? What's this thing where we suddenly, one day we're a child drawing and then the next we're an adult and we've stopped? And actually that we're better off doing all these things and keeping them going until we decide which way we want to kind of go ourselves. So it's a much more natural developmental pathway, if you like, to keep that play in there for as long as it can be.
Absolutely. And how do you sort of encourage or support parents to put play in at home? So I know you mentioned like being more playful. That what does that look like for a parent of a child with PDA?
Well, I think the sort of humour and playfulness is an essential part of that, because like we said, it's part of that connection and that active involvement as a parent, and reducing that stress at times that can be really difficult, because saying to a child, you need to go to bed now, or it's bedtime, or I'm going to turn the computer off in 3 minutes, or go and brush your teeth, those are very, very difficult for children who are pressure sensitive or demand avoidant or PDA. So actually in those times that could bring quite a lot of tension for that child, particularly if they're very stressed, is there another way that you can combat that? Is there a way that you can reduce that tension? And coming in there with some playfulness or humour will bring that down. So bringing that in at times of tension, but also bringing that in at other times, because for a lot of these children, they're incredibly sensitive. They often feel that they've done something wrong or they're in trouble. And play is a way that tells that child, I'm not in trouble. This adult is not annoyed with me. And you'll be surprised how many think, even just the voice slightly raised or a clear direction, that child will think, I'm in trouble, I've done something wrong. So it indicates them, if we've got that playfulness in there, that they haven't done something wrong.
Yeah, and that's so crucial and really great advice there. What about in a school setting? So would it be parallel to that, or when you've got like 30 of the children in the classroom, is there certain ways that you think I don't know, I just kind of want to give teachers like a thing or a bit of advice or a bit of try this, it's playful and it will help.
I think if you can, without shoehorning it in so it's inauthentic, because they'll also know when you're doing something that doesn't feel genuine. But if there's a way that you can bring in something that that they're interested in, if you've seen them outside playing a certain game or talking about a certain thing, if you can bring that in to that space with them when you're trying to connect with them, that will be really, really helpful. So, if they're really into playing Uno, then maybe you can say, oh, I'm really struggling with Uno. I thought the rules were if you did this and this happened. And then that child can say, oh, no, what you need to do is this. And the teacher can say, oh, do you think you could show me sometime? So there's no pressure on it, but it's inviting that child into something with a conversation that they feel comfortable to have because you've already seen them playing Uno. So thinking around those sort of things, but also you can really pique that child's curiosity with pet play as well. So bringing that into the learning, giving the children much more opportunity to learn through that will take that demand off that it's sort of assessed learning, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And one of the things I always have in the back of my mind is speaking to a child as if they're like a colleague rather than like a child in my class essentially. So say if I wanted, I don't know, my TA to do something or a parallel teacher, I'd phrase it very differently to if I wanted a child to do it. I'd be like, oh, could you do me a favor? I'd perhaps ask it in that way, which isn't as demanding as right, I need you to sit down and I need you to get this done and do this now. I would never talk to a colleague like that. They'd all be like, who on earth are you? So for me, that's one little trick, if that's what you want to call it, or strategy that I thought it's just really useful for a lot of children, but crucial for our children with that PDA profile.
Yeah, it's removing that hierarchy. That hierarchy is just too difficult for those children. You know, often I'll speak to parents and they'll say, oh, they were okay with this teacher, and then they moved to a new class, or they moved up a year or whatever, and they've got a new teacher, and this teacher, they say, shouts. And it turns out this teacher isn't necessarily shouting, but perhaps they've got more of an authoritative air to them, and that can be really, really difficult for that child. So trying to bring that, sort of lower that down, like you said, and be a colleague is going to be really helpful. And another thing we've talked about in some of the books is sort of a learning facilitator, that you're there as a kind of side by side, so that you're kind of learning with them rather than you sort of directing learning towards them. You're with them trying to figure stuff out, and again, that kind of makes you on an even, it levels the playing field, doesn't it? You're both on the same level when you're doing that learning.
Absolutely. And that's like part of play, play, true play, free play. It's child led, it's child directed. If it's play, and that's what we're calling it, then it's not me telling you what to do. You're directing that. And I always talk about, in our schools and our settings, there's essentially like a what's the word, like a continuum sort of play, because we've got being playful and what we were saying as a parent, perhaps you'd like your child to come and brush their teeth and you're going to be playful about it. So on one of the previous podcasts I was talking to Claire Bauer, and we were saying, like, can you, depends on the age of your child, but can you go, can you, let's move like monkeys, or let's move like cat, just doing something a bit playful, bit fun, you doing it as well, is hopefully going to help your child to not even realize that what you're getting them to do is perhaps brush their teeth, because you're just engaged in this fun little game, and we're going to do that. Um, and it's about getting that into from that point, which is essentially like just being playful and all of that, to the other end, which is that pure child-led free play. And then somewhere in the middle, we've essentially got like playful learning, whereby it's, I'm the teacher and I need to teach you a specific thing. So perhaps I want to teach you, I don't know, to use capital letters. And I'm going to do that activity in a way that's active, that's engaging, that makes it more playful, that makes it more like a game than me just saying to you, okay, here's a worksheet. I want you to go put those in. You've got to do this by break time, otherwise you're going to miss your break. And it's that whole ecosystem essentially of play, when we can bring that all together. So we've got the playful moments, we've got the sort of teacher directed playful learning, and then we've got the free play and the child-led play. If we can have that in the environment, there isn't a single child that isn't going to thrive, that isn't going to feel safe. And all the schools that I've spoken to through doing the campaign work, their data, they've said to me their data is above average, or their data has exceeded than when they previously had like a more formal classroom. So the data's there that shows us this. The anecdotes are there. When I ask questions about, well, their behavior, or are they actually learning this? That's all there. I can give you a million of those myself. And so you just wonder, like, why is this not statutory? Why is this not a core way of how we are teaching our children, when it's essential for some, but it's beneficial for absolutely all
And
children?
I love that, don't you, when things are about benefiting everyone, because often, when our children fall into this sort of SEND category, which I really struggle with, to be honest, even the fact they're called sort of special, it sort of feels a bit patronizing. I don't think we need to separate out, what you've just said, that's a whole classroom, and that's everyone feeling included. And often comes up a lot when I speak to families, is, you know, these supports are sort of these add-ons for these children, and that just makes them stand out and feel different. And actually, when we do these whole class approaches, that's about everyone feeling that is inclusion, because everyone's doing things together. And I think that's much more important. And the other thing that I noticed is when you were talking about play was how much more animated you were, and I think that's so important as well for children. You know, often learning is so static, isn't it? I've been doing all this somatic work for myself, and it's all about movement and sort of, you know, because once we sort of re-engage with our own body and have that connection with our body, that creates a sort of healthy mind and optimism too. So I think, you know, play immediately creates movement, doesn't it? So that's a really important thing for our minds and our bodies to feel engaged. And often children who are highly stressed in that classroom environment, who are sitting dead still, and the teachers saying, you know, well, they seem fine in here, they're completely disengaged at that point. You know, I went through that myself, seeing my child was just completely, you know, grey pallor, but sitting still, motionless, not saying a word, and they were apparently fine.
And that's one of the worst things, I think, because is it okay to be fine, or do we want our children to thrive? And that's and actually, are they really fine? Well, no, a lot of our children aren't actually fine, but it comes down to, again, sort of a wider issue in education, and perhaps one of the reasons why play-based learning isn't currently in place. It comes down to that control aspect. And again, I flip this. So to me, I'm like, what do you want? We want children to get an education. So for me, I want them to be happy. I want them to be learning. The best way for them to do those things, I know, is through play. So is that your goal? Or if you're the powers that be that can make these decisions, is your goal to have control, to have all children doing the same, to have conformism, to have children perform for a test, which, you know, research shows us if you teach your children in a formal way, they can get good test results in the short term. You can train children to pass a test and do well. But then that learning disappears. They don't have that long-term embedded learning. They haven't learned it for an intrinsic reason. It doesn't really mean anything to them. They haven't made the links within their brain. In the long term, they will forget that. It won't be embedded. But in the short term, you've had that control over them. You've taught them to this test. You've passed that. Is that the goal of education in England? Or is the goal of education in England to develop individual children that know how to learn, that can delve deeper, that can question, that can pass a test? And this is the other thing. When I speak to schools that have play-based learning embedded, some of them say, like, the year two SATs, they're not statutory now, so you don't have to do them, but they choose to do them because they are so confident and excited that their children would pass them anyway because of the learning that they've got. They're almost like, okay, bring it on, we want the challenge, as opposed to it being what it is in many scenarios for them.
Yeah, and I think, you know, as parents, coming with my parent hat on, you know, we're long-term invested in our children, aren't we? We're not here just to sort of get the grade so they, you know, they get the marker, and then other, you know, they've done better than another school in the area, and then more parents want them to go there. That's not our interest. Our interest is long term. You know, we want our children to know what their intrinsic drive and motivations are, and that comes through a very different way of learning. And I think that at the minute it's a very target driven system, and actually we are the customers. The parents and the children are the customers, and it's not meeting our needs at the minute.
Completely agree. Completely agree on all aspects. I spoke to a lady the other day. She teaches in Denmark now. She used to teach in England. And I just wanted to delve in a little bit deeper to what it's like, because we all talk about, you know, these Scandinavian countries and how amazing it is. But okay, we know that. Let's go a little bit deeper. And she was just saying how they don't teach their children to read until they're 7 years old, but you can't really compare because the culture is so different. So there wouldn't be any parents saying, you know, my child hasn't read yet. There wouldn't be any teachers concerned that these children haven't been taught to read yet.
Mm.
So the children are literally allowed to learn through play, And then their formal teaching of reading starts when they're 7, when they've got all those prerequisite skills. They're so happy. They love learning. And they're just truly ready for it, as opposed to being forced to do it younger and younger, earlier and earlier, which is what's happening in England as well at the moment. We're testing children younger. And, with the curriculum that was introduced in 2014, everything that they used to learn in year 2 got shunted down to year 1. Child development hasn't changed. Our children haven't changed, but what you're expecting them to do is now harder than most of those children are developmentally ready for, like you were saying. And it just blows my mind. I just don't understand how it's okay. And as the customers of the education system, I truly think this campaign, this petition is saying, we're not happy. Here's the solution. And my biggest takeaway for Bridget Phillipson or anybody who has the power to change listening is putting play in place will help you achieve your aims, because our children will achieve better. And I know that to be
I
true.
think we all know that though, don't we? I think that's what's so frustrating. We all know that, and it's a really it's such a shame because we're doing children such a disservice. We can see that the world is rapidly changing and our education system is not keeping up with it at all. Interestingly, older children, as I'm now in an older children world, having teenager, that a lot of them are not going, a lot of them are choosing not to go to university as well. So that's quite interesting that once they are autonomous, a lot of them are deciding that that's not for them because, they're choosing other ways to they need to figure themselves out basically. And I think being out there and exploring is something we've taken away in their younger years, and that's such a shame. We should be giving them a rich exploratory learning experience earlier on, so that they're kind of getting there quicker, if you like. When they get to 18, they sort of had that broad. A lot of them haven't. We've cut the creative subjects down to a bare minimum, so they're not getting a broad, colourful, exploratory experience. Because we know as adults how great learning is, don't we? When we get to do it ourselves, we can do it in brilliant ways, but they don't get to do that in school.
It's so true. It honestly is so true. And I think as an education system, the fact that so many children do come out of school and they don't know what they want to do, well, we've kind of failed them there. Like, and there's so many children that have fallen into the trap of, I don't know what I want to do. I kind of got an all right grade in that, so I'm going to go and do a degree for 3 to 4 years.
And getting loads of debt on something I'm not quite sure if.
And
Yeah.
then I'm going to come out with loads of debt and a degree, and I'm still not going to know what it is that I want
Mm.
to do.
And I think on a serious note, I also speak to lots of adults through my work, and they're adults that sort of, getting to middle age going, I don't know what I want to do. I don't know what I like. I don't, and so this is where we need to go right back to our children and be offering them this exploration of themselves so that they can feel a little bit more sure of themselves going into that adult world and having a sense of self. Because I think often when it's been so dictated by others about what they should be able to do and manage, they don't have that sense of self when they're older.
It's so true. Even, I'm going to sort of finish on this little example, but even 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds. My little girl does it at home. We have a little snack table. So it's just little shifts and changes. So I realized she would always need me. She'd come to me and be like, Mummy, I'm hungry. Can I have a snack? I'd go in the cupboard. I'd be like, here you go. You can have one of these. And it would be like, I don't know, a saurine or just something like in a packet. She got it. It was easy. And a few weeks ago now, it's just like, why don't we switch this? And now she just has this little table. I will choose what I'm going to put out there. So it might be like some watermelon, or it might be some bread and some butter. And then she can access that. Obviously, I supervise her, but she can access it. She can make her little sandwich. She can cut her piece of watermelon. I've got like child-safe scissors. She has complete autonomy of, I'm feeling hungry, I want to go and eat something, and I'm going to choose it, and I'm going to develop the skills to do it myself, supervised, but completely like
Yeah.
there. And that's the difference. Even as a parent, I've gone from spoon feeding you to here's a little bit of have a go, see if you
Mm.
like it. I'll put different things out. They might try new things because, like, I put some like cottage cheese out with crackers the other day. They wouldn't have necessarily had that before. They'd have been like, yeah, I don't want that. But I put it there and then it just helped. And that's what I think education should be for all, not just about the food, but that is one part of it, of the
And I think, you know, that would be somewhere people would say, I'm always thinking about the grey suit and the lanyard saying, oh, well, you do that and they're just going to eat all of it and then they're going to, and actually that's not true because when we give children the opportunity to explore for themselves, they actually don't, it doesn't lead to sort of this, you know, wild behavior at all because they're able to monitor themselves and what they need. You know, I've always had a snack cupboard that my child can access. Has she ever overeaten with that? No, because over, you know, she knows her limits, if you like, and that's because she's always had that opportunity to explore it for herself.
100%. I couldn't agree more. And I think the problem is the control that we need as a society, the grey suits need, as opposed to us, the professionals, the educators, the teachers, the experts that are saying, actually, if we give them a bit more control, it will help us all in the long run.
Yeah.
It absolutely will. Um, if anybody's listening to this and they are really relating to what you described at the beginning as a parent, your experience as a PDA, or they're a teacher, what can they do to sort of, where can they go? What would your advice be to just help them play and delve a little bit deeper into understanding?
Yeah, well, I suppose, you know, I do have to mention my own books, not to do a hard sell,
Absolutely.
but if you're a teacher, I'd say The Educator's Experience of PDA is a really good book, and that's something I co-authored with Laura Kirby, and she has a font of knowledge. She's been a head teacher, but she's now does training and runs a tuition service for children with a PDA profile. She's really gets it, and I think those adults that get it are few and far between, but she is one of them. So I'd recommend that. And then for families wanting to know more, I'd say the family experience of PDA probably is a good place to go. And you'll probably see tons and tons of stuff out there, but I would always say go with your instinct on this. And our children are going to gravitate towards the most authentic individuals, and not see hierarchy. And those are kind of the people we aim to be, really strive to be for our children.
Amazing. And where can people find you? What are your handles?
So my website is missingthemark.co.uk, and that's got links to all my social media links as well. So
Amazing. Eliza, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you, tap into your brilliant knowledge, and just have this conversation with you, which needs to get out there, needs to be listened to, and hopefully will build that momentum for change that so many of us have been banging the drum for.
thanks. Yeah, and I just to end, I think that's so important. It's what we said. It's a whole class approach. I think it is doable. We know what's doable. We just need the grey suits to hear us, don't we?
Absolutely. So if you have signed the petition, amazing. But the next thing that we need everyone to do is please go and email your MP, so we can spread the word and get as many MPs there on debate day because play is learning. And I need that for all of them. Thank you ever so much, Eliza.
Thank you.